Well, good. Well, let's get our conversation started. Thanks everybody for joining. We've got Carrie. You are a popular. You're one of the cool kids in the crowd. We had a ton of registrations, and I'll bet they'll be coming in as the session unfolds. And I'm excited that I get to have this session with you. This is I don't know what number, but we've been doing these every single week, and it's been fun to see how they build on one another. This time we're rolling back to some basics that affect every other part of the customer experience, and that's how we treat our team, what we're going to do differently to make sure that our culture is top shelf. And so, one, I want to thank everybody for joining because over the next couple of minutes, I think there's going to be more people on here than we have time to do for introductions because I'd like to introduce even our attendees. Um, we're just gonna skip that part, and I'm gonna work on introducing my friend here in just a moment. Now, first, I like to just talk about how these Thursday at 3 sessions are not supported. They're not sponsored. These are just done just to try to collaborate. I found when I was an administrator, it was very difficult to know who I go to get more information or to be a mentor or to ask about some of the more troubling challenges that we have in our field. And so that's what these sessions were created for. Every Thursday is a clearinghouse for us to talk about how we can shape our practices in a better way, whether it's implementation of new technology or how to treat our team better. Sometimes we'll even talk about our own self-awareness, which I'm sure will come up today. But I do
Mhm.
have some financial disclosures that are worth talking about, and you can see those there, although our sessions aren't supported today. So today we're talking about building a team culture that patients notice. Um, they say in the experience world that we want an experience that's so good you don't need uh, to market, right? That advertising is a tax you pay for being unremarkable. And I say that knowing that we've been in the ad agency business for almost 20 years. I was at Vance Thompson Vision for 20 years, have been away for a couple, and those two businesses have run parallel to one another. And that's where I currently reside as part of Men Join Make, which is our marketing team, and Margin, which is currently the operations arm of it. Now, I'm going to introduce you, Carrie, in just a moment here, but before I do want to just talk about a couple of upcoming things that are worth you noting. Next week, we're going to be talking about, or 2 weeks after that, sorry, we're going to be focusing back on the implementation of new technology and getting back to also interventional glaucoma. Those are some of the biggest challenges we have today. And there's a couple of courses that are coming up this fall that all of our attendees should consider going to. One is the business of refractive cataract surgery, and the other is the business of interventional glaucoma. This is how to implement these new technologies. And I'm just going to give you a minute to take a snapshot of those QR codes because we'd really love to see you there. They're both put on by the ASOA in conjunction with ASCRS. And Carrie is the current president of ASOA. So Carrie, even before your introduction, maybe tell us a little bit about the BRICS course, the Business of Refractive Cataract Surgery, why people should attend.
Yeah, thanks, Matt, and thank you for inviting me to join you this afternoon. I really appreciate it. Our topic today, as we've talked about so many times, is near and dear to my heart. But the business of refractive and cataract surgery, what is so critical about this is when you think about the statistics that we hear, that only 18% of you know practices are converting to premium channel IOLs. And this technology has been around for over 20 years. When you think about that 18%, that leaves such a huge wide open window for opportunity. And so, how do we help practices develop a system and a process, implementation, and guidance to actually make this successful? And that truly is the heart of this program.
Well, and with that, Carrie, you mentioned the 18%, but I'm willing to bet that people in Bloomington, Minnesota, where your practice is, that where you probably have somewhere between 30 and 40% adoption, I'm just guessing, but maybe higher. And other markets where they only have 12. It's not
Mhm.
like the people in Bloomington just wake up in the morning and they're like, you know what, we probably just want to see a lot more. We have an intention to see better than people from, Tallahassee or whatever the market is that's doing 12%. We know that's not the reason. We know it's because patients just aren't hearing about the options. And so a course like this, so critical. So thanks for that little introduction on it. And I'm gonna, while I do your introduction, Carrie, try to get everybody's image back because I'm flying blind here. I can't
Oh,
see
no.
you, but you can see me, which is unnerving. It's like every police interview or Senate hearing I've ever been a part of. Just kidding. The session that we're having next week is with a friend and mentor of mine, and certainly of Dr. Thompson's, one of my other friends and mentors, Dr. Dan Dury from Kansas City. Used to be the head of Hunkler Eye Institute, and then Dury Vision, a real innovator in new technologies, countless FDA monitored clinical trials, some of the best teams in adopting new technology that there is. Well, he's going to be joining me next week to talk about getting to yes. How do we talk about the IOLs? How do we present them to patients? How do we get more confident about it? Should we be leery about sales? He's a master at those conversations, and it's going to be a nice add-on to the conversation we had with Dr. Thompson, his mentee, just a couple weeks ago. So join us for Dr. Dan Dury. That's next week, and share that QR code with your friends as well. We think just by listening to it, you're sure to get a couple of morsels that'll make your team more confident. Finally, your introduction, Carrie. Carrie's been a friend of mine for a long time. I consider myself to, while I hid for a long time in a very successful practice, I wasn't the best administrator. Maybe I was okay at casting a vision, but not necessarily at articulating or delegating or doing the work required to get it done. I had great people around me to do that. But when I had questions about how to implement new things, I went to people like Carrie to know how do you work a system like a practice with all of its different parts to make sure that things can be presented well and optimized. And she's done that extremely well while building a really good team culture. She's the head of operations at Chew Vision with Ralph Chew and others, and is currently the president of ASOA. Carrie, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Matt. And likewise, turning to you on many, many occasions, even visiting your practice to see how you made the magic work. Definitely a lot to learn from you as well.
Yeah, it's been a fun road, and I'm glad that even in my transition away from the practice into more work like this, that we still get an occasion to talk about things. Now, we're just going to stay here on this slide, and I might even pull the slides down for a minute because we're going to talk about something that really drives a lot of our work. It affects everything we do, and that's how well we can align our team with our goals and initiatives. How do we build a team culture that patients really notice? And I remember times where reps or patients would come into our office and say to me, after coming through the process, I don't know what it is about this place. It just feels different. So, talk to me about that, Carrie, about what it feels like to walk into some practices and versus others, and how you can just know in the air that something is different about the culture.
Well, I think first and foremost, culture isn't a poster,
Hmm.
right? It's not something you put on your wall, and just look at every time you walk past or through the break room. I mean, culture is a daily practice. And I believe that culture is something that you live, and when you live it, it comes through from your team. And we have that same thing, Matt, in our practice where reps will come in, and we've had this very recently in looking at different EMR systems. And I try to explain, like, we kind of are a little bit different, on how we see our patients. Because everyone is like, okay, that's a cookie cutter kind of process for most practices. And then when reps do come in and they sit back and they go, wow, this is really different. But why is it so different? And I think it's that foundation that everyone is aligned to the same mission, and the mission comes from the top, like from the CEO level, and the strong leadership that supports that mission that just kind of inseminates throughout the practice. And it's not even an effort. What I like to call it at True Vision is the True mystique, right? The mystique of like, why does this feel so different? Why do I feel so well taken care of? Even though it seems effortless, there's a lot that goes into working that behind the scenes.
Well, so let's get to that because I think that it's easy for us to look at something like culture and start to use words like you just used, which I love, by the way, the chew mystique. But when you don't have a good culture, sometimes when I talk about the VTV way, like that's not helpful.
Right.
And so what do I do Monday to start to build a team culture that is second to none? And knowing full well that it's incredibly difficult to build, and in a moment you can lose it, right? It's so
Oh, yeah.
fragile. So what are some tactical ways that you've worked on team culture in your program in Minnesota?
That is so true. I think knowing what your core cultural pillars are, right? Identify those cultural pillars. For example, one of our cultural pillars is education. Another one is communication. And a third one is caring. And that is really how we work our team is with those three pillars. So the educational pillar um, is foundational, right? We train all of our staff, no matter what position you're in. If we're bringing in a new technology, for example, we are training and educating the entire team, not just the people on the front lines, not just the people in the clinic, not just the doctors. It goes all the way through the practice so that every single person on the team knows how much they are important to that patient journey, no matter if they are on the front end with a phone call or on the billing end on the very back side. Everyone is aligned in knowing what's happening in the practice. So education ties very closely then with communication. So strong, open communication, st- you know, non-negotiable team meetings and staff meetings, right? They're just non-negotiable,
We're going to
right?
come back to that.
Yeah. So I mean, so it's and then caring just kind of underlies all of it because we hire, and I'm sure everyone on this call hires good, caring people. They fit your culture, they align with your mission, and if they don't, for some reason, end up being someone that, maybe wasn't who you originally hired, they tend to stick out and they tend to actually be a little bit of a cultural vampire. And so identifying that and really addressing that very quickly, I think is also hugely important. Right? So you bring in the people that are caring, that want to care for others, both patients and coworkers, and then you have that communication and education alignment. And that, while it sounds super, super basic, I think is the foundation that helps you build those building blocks to a good culture.
Those are really good pillars, and I want to revisit each one of those because as important it is to have those. With the first two, at least, you also gave concrete examples, right? And here's our value, education, and here's what it looks like. These kinds of informational, educational events that you need to be a part of, right? Or and by the way, that one is also outward facing to the optometric community, maybe.
Mhm.
So, because everybody's view of what education means, is much different. When you say education to me, I get flashbacks from high school, not positive, right? So, for example, I remember my use of caring back before I worked, in the eye care world, and I was a marketing rep. I remember doing this whole video series for an agricultural client, and they had me go into small town South Dakota and film this whole family on their farm. And it was very intrusive for a suit to go onto this farm and be disruptive with cameras and lights and the whole thing. And because of that, I sent that family a bouquet of flowers, and I sent them from me, right? Because I care. Yet, it really offended the client I was working for because they were the ones who were funding it. They were the ones that wanted the credit for it. And so, to think it really through, I should have sent the flowers from them. And then maybe supplemented a few days later after they got the win, a handwritten note saying, hey, oh, and by the way, I really loved this. But it's so, we have to really define it for people or they'll take their version of caring and apply it, but it might not be exactly what you're thinking. And especially today, We talk about Ritz-Carlton and things like
Mm.
that. We want the Ritz-Carlton experience. My friend John DeJulius, book author and consultant and mentor, says, yeah, we can't expect the Ritz-Carlton experience from people who've had a red roof in life.
So
And,
true.
and that's not a commentary about wealth, it's a commentary about experience. They're just,
Experience.
a lot of our team is young.
Hmm.
So how are we going to bring that out? And so I want to challenge you on those three values. When you say, education is one of our defining pillars,
Hmm.
rattle off some things that help to pick that. And I'll do the same with ours because it's one of ours as well.
Sure. Certification is very important to us, right? And so we support, encourage every one of our team members to gain certification when they're hired. We give them a timeline, we help them achieve the goal, but we let them know when they start with our practice that no matter what position you're in, we will find a certification for you. We will continue to support that, and we will honor that and celebrate it when you achieve that. And they feel, and our team feels valued from that. Like, I'm not just starting a job. This practice, this business is willing to invest in me, and our investment in you helps the team. So it's definitely a win-win, but I think the importance of helping our team feel valued, understood, and heard, and praised for achieving their goals and accomplishments is so it's such human nature, but I think it's so easily forgotten and so easily overlooked in a very, very, very busy practice. We can say, we can walk, we can talk the talk, like, hey, you get certified and all these things. But if you don't walk the walk and help guide them to achieve that and show them the stepping stones along the way, is that really, is that really aligning with your educational vision? Not
Well,
really. Not really.
you're exactly right. And a lot of times my mentors have seen more in me than I saw in myself. And so when I started a place, I'm imagining myself being a team member, and they've put a goal out there for certification or a certain training that's higher than my expectations of myself. At first it can be a little overwhelming. But when I think about it, I start to think, okay, so they see me in a role bigger than I currently am. Like they see a future
Mhm.
that maybe I haven't even realized it. When you start to think about that kind of um, investment of an organization to yourself, you can't help but think that they're interested in me for longer than just the next few weeks, like the busy season, or they wouldn't invest in it. And so
Exactly.
that has all of the makings of a team member who's going to then, with reciprocity, invest back in you,
Mhm.
right? They want to see the organization then beyond themselves or just the near term. And it's just this virtuous cycle. One of the things we did at Vance Thompson Vision, and we have something like it at Men Join Make as well, is that every year there's a certain amount of dollars kind of held to the side that up to a maximum that can be used to attend training, a national meeting, a certification, a regional meeting. And some of them save up those dollars at the place I used to work and head to the Royal Hawaiian Eye meeting, right? And they pay the difference because it doesn't cover the whole thing. But then they get a wealth of training. The caveat is that when you get back, you have to present on what you learned.
Mhm.
But it does give everybody this mindset of, listen, we are going to raise the level of our craft, and we're going to start with us first. Another tactical one, and I know you do this too, you have educational events for
Mm.
like the local technician community or the local optometric community. And
Yeah.
by the way, this is a huge thing with the government lately to crack down on the improper use of education and certifications. But when done properly, it can really be helpful to raise the level of awareness and the standard of care in a whole region. And we had an internal commitment that we never present externally what we haven't communicated internally. So, we don't invite a couple hundred optometrists in and their teams to present on stuff if we haven't presented it to our own team. If the phone person can't stand up and give those slides, basically what I'm saying, then none of us give the slides. And so the Friday before our Friday, optometric retreats, we would have our own team retreat where we're going through the slides secretly. It was my secret way of getting all the slides from the doctors early. But 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 and the team really felt like they were required to give feedback on how it could be better. They're now engaged, and it kind of evens the playing field, and it's an investment of time. So I love that pillar of education. And I think for all of you on the line, there's a number of ways that you can, exploit that in a good way towards the development of your team. I think sessions like this, could
Mhm.
be good for that too. You've got maybe managers on your team that would be helpful to log in and listen to someone like Carrie for 45 minutes or so, not so much me. But to talk about their own how you bring inspiration like that into the program. But I'm not going to
I
let
love
it here.
I love how you said that, Matt, about how I love the dress rehearsal, by the way. I'm gonna steal that. So that's
Yeah.
my little takeaway that I'm jotting down is steal the dress rehearsal for the next big optometric symposium. But we also do the same thing with any of of our team members that attend the big national meetings, or even if they're going to more of a local meeting, is share with the team your top three takeaways.
Hmm.
I was nervous that people would feel shy and not necessarily know how to share what they've learned, but they come prepared. They have their nuggets, their bullets, and how they want to apply them. And it's so empowering for them to be able to share what they learned with their enthusiasm. And I think that that enthusiasm continues then to inspire the rest of the team. So we do the same thing, and I love it.
I love that. One example that a team member came up with is we were trying to include all of our technicians in kind of, that the non-COAs would become COAs, the COAs would become COTs, and COTs might become COMTs or whatever the cascade might be. The We found we were doing a course led by our own internal ODs for our own team every fall. And it was a 9-part course because the workbook is 9 sections. And
Mhm.
so they were just meeting after work every Monday for 9 weeks after Labor Day. It kind of fit perfectly between Labor Day and Thanksgiving. And somebody said, "Hey, why don't we invite all the area techs to come as well?"
Oh, cool.
Well, no kidding. I mean, we don't want anything for it. Nobody's paying for anything. We're just trying to increase, the level for everybody. Now, we're talking about really tactical things. Like how does
Mhm.
becoming a better tech or training other techs to be better techs, what does that have to do with team culture? Well, when you start to have this kind of esprit de corps and establish yourself as an educator or one who consumes education, you can't help but develop some swagger about what you do day in and day out. And that
Mhm.
kind of belonging, that kind of um, self-realization is really critical in building confidence in what eventually become manifests itself as team culture. I want to move us along, Carrie, to this next question, which is the second leg of your stool, which is communication.
Yeah.
Tactically, give me examples of how people see that play out in real time, and examples of what you would say to your team of like, when I say we really want good communication to build our culture, it looks like this.
Hmm. I think we see it. I'll answer your question in a second. I think we see it more clearly on the flip side, on poor communication, right? Poor communication leads to distrust, it leads to disconnection, and it just leads to an apathetic view of your role and of your position. So, strong communication, on the other hand, is the foundation of culture. And that doesn't mean more meetings, right? It means clear expectations, real-time feedback, and knowing that your voice matters,
Hmm.
right? So I'm just talking foundationally there, right? We focus on connection too, but not just between staff, but between staff and patients as well, right? So when our team members feel connected to one another, then that energy just translates into a more personalized, meaningful encounter with the patients. So patients feel like they're not part of a system, or part of a community. Um, so that's kind of like my philosophical view on communication. But then how do you execute on that? And I think it's not always easy to carve out that time to have those regularly scheduled meetings. So in between those meetings that have, like I said earlier, are non-negotiable, we block time from our schedule, we block time from patient care to make them happen. But in between the meetings is really the opportunity for for good communication to happen. Right. You can have, I know, Matt, in your previous practice, you had, the morning huddles. Well,
Right.
as the practice grows and you have multiple locations, and then all of a sudden there's staggered schedules, and you have the mom that can't get there because she has to drop off, and all of a sudden it's fractured, right?
Mhm.
And that has been my challenge, right? Those fractured moments of not having everyone connected. So how do you still maintain that? And one thing that we've learned is to embrace technology, right? Not just typing out a bulletin or typing out a Teams message that goes out. But if there's something I want to say to you, my kids, if they want to call me, they're not picking up the phone. They're FaceTiming me if they're not texting me. If it's something like, hey, mom, I really need this right now, they're FaceTiming me. I'm like, aha, what can we use that can actually, I can give you my emotion, share what's
Mhm.
happening with some emphasis. And so we've adopted Loom training, as part of the communication. We can see if people have seen it or not seen it, and they're snippets, they're quick. If it's more than a minute and a half, we're losing people. So you make
Right.
them quick, you make them succinct, and you're just getting that communication out. So think about the technology as my pearl on what you can do to enhance when you can't always meet live in person as a group.
Well, and Loom is extremely surgeon friendly, right? Because
Yes.
they can receive that Loom video, and like all my doctors, they can watch it at 3 times speed, because
Yep.
they're always asking me, couldn't that 30-minute meeting, couldn't that have been 5 minutes? Like, my goodness. Yes, fine. Right. And so, and then it's also cataloged, well, so you can look back on those things. I totally agree. By the way, communication is what team members always say in surveys that they wish they had more of.
Mm-hmm.
Always. Every survey, every time. And as leaders, we have to have the discernment of what is actually worth sharing.
Right.
Because some, kind of like the grandpa who lifts a heavy bag. I hear the story about a grandpa who lifts a heavy bag off a bus, and the grandson wants to carry it. And the grandpa, well, I'm ruining the story. Basically, the kid can't carry it. It's too heavy. There's too much in there. So we have to know what needs to come out of the suitcase before we let people carry it for us or with us, giving them the illusion maybe of good communication, but not necessarily all the times when we maybe over communicate and we shouldn't. We almost like the airline that almost hits the mountain. We don't need to know that.
No, we don't. And I think knowing which areas in your practice, depending on your practice size, of course, but knowing which areas in your practice have the hardest time communicating within their team. For example, I found that my patient experience, my front of house,
Mm,
those wonderful people that are taking the phone calls and greeting and checking in and checking out patients, they're constantly in the role of taking and receiving some kind of patient communication, right? The phones don't just turn off, right? And you can't just pull the whole team aside and have a meeting. So I think that is one of the biggest challenges in most practices is having those individuals, those groups that have completely patient-facing roles and keeping them looped in and connected as a team without taking all of their personal time outside
mhm.
of the business hours as well. That's a trick. Matt, do you have any suggestions on that one?
Well, I think that, when you're, whether it's hallway conversations that have an agenda, where you're trying to,
Mhm.
coordinate work, not the conversational stuff, the relationship building stuff, but whether it's that or in an office or meeting room, conference room, every meeting when it starts, we should be asking ourselves, what problem are we trying to solve right now?
Mhm.
That should completely dictate the length of the meeting. A lot of times, a 60-minute meeting request fills itself with 60 minutes worth of content. And isn't it amazing how it
Yes,
always fits so perfectly into 60 minutes?
without fail.
I'll bet it would also fit into 15 minutes if they knew that's all they had.
Mhm.
And so that's one. What problem are we trying to solve? Two, When we're done and we've resolved on some things or talked about some issues, or maybe we've, committed to something, who else needs to know what we just discussed, right? And I don't like to be the one that decides that, because then it becomes kind of a delegate up organization.
Hmm.
I kind of like to be the one who asks and then let the team tell me. It does a couple things. One, it starts to work on my replacement, which I always want there to be 5 or 6 people ready.
Yep.
Um, but also it starts to get the team thinking about, wow, it's harder to think of those people than I thought. It might be too much information for that person, but I would have said that person. And so I think it invites them into the complicated nature of being a leader, which again, we're back to the expectations. We're expecting more of them than they expected from themselves. Okay, we're going to jump to that last pillar that you mentioned about caring, because I want to hear some specific examples of how team members, showcase caring in a way that you would consider to be consistent. But before I do, everybody who's on the line, I want to challenge you. As soon as we're done with this, or even during it, you can unmute and ask questions, because I mean, a lot of you are excellent leaders. All of you are excellent leaders. It's just some of you I don't know. And I think you have a lot to add to this conversation. And I'm talking to you, Wendy Meyer, who's a Brandon Valley Lynx from 1996. Okay. So talk to me about how we depict caring.
Example that just jumps into mind when you ask me that question, Matt, is not that long ago, and I'm not trying to pull an example out to, pull any heartstrings, but it kind of really defines the answer to your question.
Pull them, pull the heartstrings.
We had a patient that was young guy, I mean, 50s, he was in his 50s for cataract surgery, and he passed away unexpectedly. And
Mm,
so this obviously was very traumatic for the family. You don't expect your spouse or your husband or your dad to pass away when they're that young. So this was a very unexpected event. And through that, we learned he was also having a premium technology
mm,
for his cataract surgery. So he was, he had already prepaid out of pocket. And that was secondary to, making sure that we were respecting the family and acknowledging the family. And I was asked the question, hey, can we just can we give the family the refund since he didn't have surgery? And that was never even a question in my mind that we wouldn't do that, but it wasn't the first thing that was necessarily thought of, right? This was a person that was having surgery in that week and then just kind of taking all that information. And of course, and I said, I'm going to go ahead and contact the daughter to let her know that we would be issuing this refund for her father. And, how would you like that made out? Or how would you like that check made out? And she was very overcome when I called her. And she asked if it would be made out to her and that was planning to stop by the office to pick it up. And she was very grateful. So my team member, I mentioned this and I said, it's a delicate situation. My team member took the opportunity to write out a beautiful sympathy card from True Vision, not from her, but she took this upon herself to write this beautiful note to this daughter who we'd never met before. And when she came in to pick up that check and she cried and she said, this is going to help, figure out funeral expenses. That team member gave her the card with the check, didn't even say a word, just,
mm,
offered condolences. And that daughter, a couple days later, and this was not the intention, but she posted a 5-star Google review because we had written out this card, not about the refund, but that we had written out this card that touched her so deeply in this moment of grief that we would acknowledge her not just as, someone that's lost their father, but as a human being that was just
mhm.
being acknowledged. And that is an example of just true, authentic caring.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I love that you that you um I don't know how you got her to do that, or if she did it on her own accord, or if you asked, or however it happened. But I love that she felt the freedom to just do that.
Yes.
right? Another, in addition, you could have said, that's a really good idea. Let's call the daughter together, right?
Hmm.
Because now, you mean now she's going to become an evangelist on your behalf.
Exactly.
The team member, the daughter, of course, but the team member is going to adopt that philosophy, and it sounds like she did it anyway, right, with the rest of the team in that note. But anytime we have an example or something that we feel like really depicts a caring value, whatever the value is, that as long as it's kind of coinciding with caring, and if we can invite a team member into that, help them to own it in some way, that's the contagious part of team culture that's really edifying and can be, help everybody else around them want to do the same.
Matt, I'm smiling ear to ear because I literally was in my brain thinking empowerment is contagious.
Yeah.
And you just said the words, and patients feel it. They
Hmm.
feel it. And every person on your team should feel empowered to make an impact to the patient experience, whether it's a warm welcome, noticing a concern, or even just stepping in without being asked. Whatever the it is, every person on the team should feel empowered and able to do that.
And I want to just add one thing to that, as I know everybody's getting ready with their questions, is that I think as leaders, we're going to, we should be trying to be a quick yes, right? We're a yes organization.
Hmm.
We can be yes, but if we can say yes and not no, it will teach the team that we want to continue to draw out their good ideas. Hey, can we refund that person? Yes, but let's think about whether or not it needs to be a refund or is it half, right? I was thinking about a sponsorship for my kids' little league. Yeah, well, yeah, we do that. We do that kind of thing. Talk to me about what you're thinking. Instead of maybe a quick no. I mean, do you know how much courage it takes to come to your office as a leader and ask you for something? If we
A
can be a
ton.
quick yes, we'll help them kind of start to take ownership of that and many other parts of the
And
program.
I've learned the yes and
Right.
versus the yes but. The yes and um I've utilized that more often than the yes but because it I just said but because it makes you feel like there is more that you're considering
That's right.
versus I'm going to say yes and shut you down, or I'm going to say yes and let's also consider this.
Yeah, you said it right. I murdered it because, and for more on this, watch Tina Fey's sessions on improv. And the rules are you never say yes, but you say yes and. So you're precisely right, Carrie. So team who's on the line, thanks for joining us. I just want to see if there's any questions or comments you have as to how you build team culture that patients would notice in your program. We only got to a couple examples, but I feel like they were good ones. Anybody have anything to add? I see some friends on there from from California.
Don't be shy.
What about our friends from New Mexico? Any commentary there? Melanie, you've got a pretty good team culture. How do you draw that out?
Hey Matt, hey Carrie.
Hey, Melanie.
This has been so good for me, especially stepping into a new leadership role within our clinic. So I took lots of notes. I love the wisdom that you guys are sharing. But I will kind of piggyback on what you guys were talking about, and something that Matt actually shared with our team. Is something similar, Carrie, to what your team member did for that patient and his family. We have this new initiative that Matt gave us the idea for, called we called it Love in Action. So pretty much we are trying to empower our staff members. We give them a little stipend to seek out those patients that may need their day brightened a little bit, or a team member that you can tell is maybe going through something, and just like encouraging them to get creative and finding ways to bless others. And it's been very cool to see people just step up and do that. And we had one, for example, that one of our technicians, we had a patient that was having some difficulties, and she was just, he was a tough nut to crack. He always seemed you know, upset, or there was something always going on. So she was able to get some information out of him and realize that he had a son that was autistic. But as she was talking about his son with him, he starts to just tell her all these things. He loves dinosaurs. He's super into, um, you know, dinosaurs and trucks, and he just was going on and on. And so she looked, you know, when is this patient coming in next? And she went out and bought his son some dinosaurs, and presented that with the patient. And so it's similar things that, you know, your team is doing, and Matt has encouraged us to implement, has just been really cool. So yeah,
What a great story.
that's been really good.
And it doesn't take much, right? It just takes a little bit to just say, hey, we notice. We
Hmm.
remember. We remember when you told us that, and it was important enough to us to bring it back around.
For sure.
I know that you guys do that with your team as well. What I thought you'd say, Melanie, is just time. Time is such a big investment when it comes to building relationship. You
Mm-hmm.
can't do it if you don't allocate time. Time is the currency of relationship.
It's good.
And so, what you guys do a lot is you meet together, you eat together. The team members that enjoy each other and spend time together tend to be the ones who stick together for the long term.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, what ends up happening is you probably start to like them too. Like I've developed a relationship with my business partner's sons. They're both wrestlers, and I wanted to be a good wrestler, but I was just a funny one. But they're good and they're in high school, and I love watching them wrestle. And I do, she sends me the link. I watch them wrestle. I shoot them texts afterwards, or when I see them at the family picnics, I like live vicariously through them. And it turns out, like when I first did, I'm like, I bet this is going to be really good, like relationship to build, like logically. But now I mean, it's going to sound so silly, but like, I really look forward to it. It makes me a better human to have that kind of part of my life, right? And so I think the closer we get to our team members and their families, the more rich our work experiences will be. I just want to let you know one of the big things that everybody wants is they want to have a patient experience, a customer experience that makes people come back.
Mhm.
And the biggest rule of thumb, if you take nothing else from this conversation, you cannot have a world-class experience if you are not world-class to work for. Just can't exist. You can't pour something out of a vase that isn't in the vase. And so just remember, what you pour into your team gets poured out for your customers. And I think that's the biggest challenge and inspiration for us as leaders. We're going to continue to have sessions like this. I'm going to pull up my screen one more time and just reference the ones that we have upcoming. Join us next week as we're talking about IOLs and how to talk about that with your patients. And then, of course, be bringing your teams to the sessions this fall. One is in Chicago in October. That's the business of refractive cataract surgery. And the business of interventional glaucoma, that's going to be in Orlando at our national meeting in October. I'm so excited that you joined me, Carrie, and I look forward to doing this a bunch more.
Thanks so much for inviting me, Matt, and also for hosting these on Thursday afternoons. I think it's a great pick me up in the week, and I appreciate you and taking your time to host these.
Well, it's good, and it's good to have them cataloged. And this is 2 hours later than I normally work on a weekday. So, listen, enjoy your week, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye bye.